Hi, friends. This is Terry Squires with today's Nashville This Is Faith. As we celebrate our 100th episode, Cornerstone Television and I would like to thank you for making the show a success and being one of your favorite programs. You know, we pray with every guest and every episode that their stories of faith will lead you closer to Jesus. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. I sat down with CeCe Winans and she shared what it was like growing up Winans.
Where it all started, well, we would have to go to Detroit, Michigan,
Okay.
if we're going that far back. I was born to wonderful parents, David Winans and Dolores Winans, and had a pretty big family. They both had 7 boys straight, and I was the first girl, and I have 2 younger sisters, so I have 9 siblings.
Oh my goodness.
And both my parents sang, and my brothers sang, and my sisters sang. We all sang. And most of them play the piano. I don't play the piano, but most of them do. And but we started in church. We were singing in the children's choir, and my parents and the teacher teamed up on me and said, "You're going to do a solo." Oh, no, I don't want to do a solo. Always enjoyed singing, but never singing out front. And they gave me a song to sing entitled "Fill My Cup, Lord." And I started crying halfway through the song. Aww. And they made me do it again next year, the next year, and the next year. And each time I would get to a certain part of the song and start crying, you know. And I believe it was then, Terry, I realized that it wasn't just being nervous, but it was something that was bigger than me. You know, I could see when I sang, even as a kid, how people were affected by it and blessed by it. And even though I didn't want to be up there doing it, you know, my parents saw a gift in me and knew that God had a call on my life, even that young. So I was about 8 years old when I started singing, and then as a teenager, I started singing some background vocals. Andre Crouch was probably my first job that I had singing. I remember doing some background vocals for him as a teenager.
Who is your inspiration?
Who was my inspiration? Well, my family was, because my 4 older brothers, they started recording before I did. And I get inspired by different artists, of course. Andre Crouch would be one, because I saw God do something with his music and his talent that I loved. Whenever I would go to one of his concerts, I saw everybody, you know, his music. You saw everybody, all different cultures at his concerts, and I was like, yes, this is what music is about. It should touch the world. It should touch the heart. It shouldn't be put in a box. So I was always inspired by Andre Crouch a lot. But as far as my inspiration for life, it's my faith.
I sat down with Lieutenant Dan, Gary Sinise, and he shared his story from Hollywood to Nashville.
Well, I have Nashville. It's interesting. I lived, as I said, I moved to California in '87 with the family. Started having our family there. Did well in the movie business. 2 or 3 years ago, I started thinking that, you know, maybe it might be time to look for a no-tax state, because the taxes are going up in California. It's crazy, you know.
We're getting a lot of people here, aren't we?
Yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive there. You pay the weather tax there. Everybody loves the weather. You pay the weather tax, for sure, among many other different things. But I just started thinking about a change for the family, and started looking at Florida and Texas and Tennessee. And I have, you know, I'd been coming here for a while, you know, doing things at Fort Campbell. You know, I actually became an honorary member of the 160th Aviation Regiment. the Night Stalkers. They're special operations aviation folks at Fort Campbell. They made me an honorary member. I've played concerts for their gala a couple of times. Have many friends here. And then it was a couple of buddies of mine that had a business in California, and they told me they were going to move to Nashville, and they had about 150 employees, and they said 125 of them are going to make the move. And I thought, well, I've been trying to figure out where to go. I think I'm going to focus my energy on Tennessee and really start looking around. We found a great house. I moved the foundation here a couple of years ago, and everybody loves it. And my daughters moved here. Their husbands both work for the foundation. My nephew and his family moved here. My wife's sister moved. We made a big move.
It's a great, great city. You're going to be playing at the Grand Old Opry soon, right?
On Sunday, yeah.
So does the band go out a lot?
Well, yeah, we're going out this weekend. We're playing at Fort Leonard Wood. We're playing at Fort Knox, and then we're going to the Opry on Sunday. The Opry is doing something really fun called the Opry celebrates 30 years of Forrest Gump. And so we're going to have all the artists on the bill at the Opry are doing songs from the Forrest Gump soundtrack, and my band will be there. It should be a really, really fun night. It's my first time at the Opry. But they've been wonderful. They're a wonderful group of folks, and obviously we've got a great group of artists on the bill that night. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I sat down with Randy Travis and his wife Mary, and they shared their love story. But your love story started years ago, and you knew each other, and God has taken you through an amazing journey. And share a little bit about that, just, when you first met, and Mary, did you know right away when?
Well, I knew how fond I was of the person, of the heart. And we had met 30 years ago. I mean, now it was in 1990, so what is it, 31 years now? And I was working with my brother who was making shirts, the stub shirts that he wore. And he would pass through town, he and Lib, and so I knew them only from business and social. I mean, we would go to dinner, and so we spent time together, but watching him day in and day out when I was around him was that humility. Here's this monster of a man as far as the country phenomena that I just thought he was a prince of a person. He was so kind to everyone he ever met. He was so gentle and so humble, and there's something you love about that. He treated everyone the same. I wasn't gonna not fall in love with him when I had the chance. We spoke and met, and we never looked back. I mean, it was just, it was something so magical, so wonderful, so quickly that there was, we know that it was in his plan, and we never know where he's going to take us.
So you knew right away once
Right
you started
away.
talking.
Right, that March 10th of 2010, I knew right away.
So what
Yeah.
happened after that?
Well, we
Started a courtship? And
yes, and that went on for about 3 years. We got engaged in 2013, actually.
You ended up getting married.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, well, it was a couple of years after we got out of the hospital, and it was Christmas, and we had talked about it under the Christmas tree, and our daughter Kavanaugh had worked with him and asked him, or told him again, or they worked on how to ask me to marry him again, because we didn't know, it wasn't the same as it was in 2013, obviously. And so he did, right under the Christmas tree, and that was in December of 14, and so March of 15 we got married.
March of 15.
Yeah, real quietly. It was wonderful.
Beautiful.
So
You have a beautiful love story. I sat down with Lily Isaacs, and she shared her life growing up and how her parents survived the Holocaust.
World War II started in September of 1939. My parents were from large families. My mother had four siblings, and her parents, and my father had 5 siblings and his parents at home. And my father would always say that when the war broke out, there was some rumor around, but of course in those days you didn't have internet, and very rarely did you have a radio, so people really didn't know what was going on, but there's rumors of war going around. So my father said that all of a sudden one day out of nowhere, these big trucks came barreling, army trucks, Nazi trucks came barreling into the little town of Częstochowa where they live. And he said that the soldiers would get out on the streets and get on these megaphones, and they'd order everybody on the street out of their homes, come out of the street. And if you didn't, they would go from house to house and just make everybody come out on the street. They had no clue why, but that's what they did. They didn't know if it was going to be a bomb or they needed to evacuate for whatever reason. But that's when they started, the Nazis started separating families. So my father and his brother were taken away from his parents and his other siblings. My mother also with her sister came out, and her mom never saw her mom again, or her brother or sister. So everything was chaotic. And they sent one person to this place, one person to that place. So they were transported. Of course, they didn't know each other at the time, just happened to be from the same hometown. But my father was transported to a Częstochowa ghetto, and my mother was at the Warsaw ghetto with her sister. And then eventually they wound up in concentration camps. My father was in Buchenwald in Germany, and my mother was in Bergen-Belsen in Germany, 2 years.
How old were they?
My mother was 19, my father was 25.
Did they even know what was really happening at that time?
They had no idea. They had no, I wondered in my mind so many times if 6 million Jews were killed, plus others. If you knew you were going to be killed in your family, would you not fight back? They didn't know. They didn't know where they were going. And then they were on starvation diets, a crust of bread a day with a glass of water. That's all they got. So people were weakened and they get sick. And they had no idea. But they survived a nightmare. I heard a lot of stories from my mother, especially. She'd tell us a lot of the things that she and her sister survived and how they got through it. But in 1945, when the war was over, they were liberated by our American soldiers and our allies. And all of my life, my mother would say, when those American soldiers busted through those gates, she said they looked like angels from heaven. And we have a great respect for our military here because they freed my parents. So that was our humble beginnings.
So how did they meet then?
After the war was over, there were so many people that were emaciated. They were skin and bone. A lot of them were sick. So they started these places called displaced persons camps. And organizations like the Red Cross, United Jewish Appeal, B'nai B'rith came together across the world. And they went into Germany and into Poland, and they started these camps where they would have proper health care, nurse them back to health with food and whatever. And my parents met in one of those displaced persons camps in Feldafing, Germany, which is outskirts of Munich. That's where they met. And I think they just had a lot in common because they were from the same hometown. And they got married there. And after they got married, they stayed 2 years. I was born there. And I have pictures of me when I was a little girl with my mother in Feldafing, Germany. But also, again, in those days, you had to have a sponsor that would send for you to come to migrate to a different country. My mother's brother was in America, and he sent for my father and my mother and I to come to New York. So we got on a ship. I don't remember it. Of course, I was only 2. I heard a lot of stories about how my mother was so seasick that my dad would have to hold me the whole time. But we landed via Ellis Island to the Hudson River and wound up in the Bronx. My uncle taught my father how to be a bread baker, which was his trade, and we started a new life here.
I sat down with William Lee Golden in his music room, and he shared his journey with the Oak Ridge Boys through the years. Everyone who thinks about the Oak Ridge Boys, they thought, you know, when I think of the Oak Ridge Boys, I think of your band, but it started before you.
Yeah.
And it was your dream to be an Oak, right?
Right. When I was singing part-time, you know, in high school, it was in high school when I first heard about the Oak Ridge Boys, and it was one of the guys I was singing an FFA quartet with was the one that brought one of their albums, and And then I had to go get the album, and it was 2 albums that really turned me on to the Oak Ridge Boys then. Was called Folk-Minded Spirituals for Spiritual-Minded Folk. And then the other one was the Oak Ridge Boys with Sounds of Nashville. Both of those albums were on Warner Brother Records back at that time. To me, those albums put them in a league that was a little different than what I considered a lot of the older gospel quartets and singers at that time. They were young guys and had a whole new flair about singing and playing music, and it resonated with me. I loved it. You call it a dream or whatever, but I'd worked with them when I was singing in part-time groups. I was working at a paper mill, working on a farm, and also had a job at the paper mill and singing part-time. And so that was out of high school, you know, and then I got married and had 3 little boys. And
What was life like on the road
on the road
with the group, with the Oaks?
Well, when I first joined, it was in 1965 in January, and I joined. And at that time, we were a struggling gospel group, like several other gospel groups. We were all struggling to survive, and we all loved singing harmonies and gospel groups. So with the Oak Ridge Boys, it was a time that, you know, we had to book our own dates. One of the guys was one of the guys would either try to book the dates, kind of manage the group within the group. Before we had agents and managers and professional managers and professional agents, we just people wanting to sing, and I joined the Oak Ridge Boys then. But during that time period, we had a bus driver some, but then sometimes, you know, maybe a bus driver would leave and you couldn't replace them right quick. But then there would be time periods where we would be not only singing, but we'd be driving the buses too. And we'd take turns driving the guys. One guy would, and the shift you always hated was the second shift at night after a concert, because you'd be exhausted. But you know, one guy would have the first shift, and somebody's got to take the second shift. And we'd drive for like 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours, and then wake somebody else up.
When did things start turning around? When all of a sudden you started becoming extremely popular? You were touring the world. And I want to talk about your story about going to Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, the Oak Ridge Boys exploded onto the scene, and you rose to fame. What was that like?
I felt like we had gone as far as we could go in gospel music. We had reached the top. We had won Record of the Year and those type things. But yet, it was a struggle to get your gospel songs played on radio, because people didn't want to hear about that but one day a week. They may tolerate it on Sunday, but they don't really want to hear that on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Saturday. It was a thing that I felt like it was a time that the Oak Ridge Boys needed to expand our music. Having to live 7 days a week, but we're only singing about subject matter that most people only want to think about or hear on just one day a week, and that'd be on Sunday. So you have to realize who you are and where you are and what you really need to do, and you really need to expand your music. So what we did is we started talking with Jim Halsey. Jim Halsey was then and was always the top manager and top booking agent in country music. He managed Roy Clark his entire career, from time Roy Clark was a side man with Wanda Jackson's band, and Jim Halsey managed him from being a side man in Wanda Jackson's band to being a superstar. Jim also managed Hank Thompson, one of the early Country Music Hall of Fame people. He managed Minnie Pearl, he managed Mel Tillis, he managed like I said, Wanda Jackson. She was in the Country Music Hall of Fame and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But 29 of Jim Hall's clients and former clients that he had managed them and booked them are now in the Country Music Hall of Fame. So he knew how to take a career, and he told us when we first got together, he said, guys, he come to see us perform. And after we performed, he come backstage. It was at the Ryman Auditorium. He said, guys, you're 3 minutes away from being a household name. And so what do you mean? He said, well, you need one song, one hit record, and you're on your way.
I think I know which one that is.
It was Y'all Come Back Saloon was the first one.
Okay.
But then we had several more, and then Elvira hit in 1981.
Yep, that's the one
We
I
had
remember.
our first country record and first country hit record in 1977. Then Elvira hit in 1981. Elvira went to the top of country charts and then just spilled right over into pop and rock and roll, and every other station then was playing Elvira during the summer of 1981. And then the next year we had Bobby Sue that kind of did the same thing. It was another, went to the top of country music, spilled over into rock and roll and pop music, and was played on all of those stations too. So it was in 1981 and 82, basically during the musical heyday of the Oak Ridge Boys for that time period, you know, and we were, at that time, we sold more singles on Elvira then in 81 than any other song, any other single that had ever sold out of Nashville. The single itself was sold over 2 million singles, and that was unheard of. The album went to be a double platinum album at that time. And when that went double platinum, all their other albums went gold.
I sat down with comedian Chonda Pierce, and she shared her heartbreak and how God has healed her life.
You know, it's interesting. I always say grief is the gift that keeps on giving, and it does. And my heart is so tender toward other widows. And I see them, they'll come to my shows, they'll say something, oh, I read your book, or I heard your husband passed, and they want a helpful hint of what's going to get through it. And I always tell them, as much as I hate to tell you this, it's just time. It just takes time. And so don't be afraid to weep. You know, I always say, getting through grief is 3 W's, you know, wake up. You know, in other words, that means just get out of bed, do the next thing. The other one is let yourself weep. But the third one is worship every chance you get.
Oh, that's good.
Because when you worship, you know, even if it's running the vacuum and playing your favorite praise music, there's something about that that puts your mindset and puts all your grief in perspective. It doesn't make it easy. I still miss my man very, very much.
How long has it been now?
It'll be actually, while we're filming this, it's 9 years tomorrow. Yeah.
Tomorrow.
So it's tender. Those are triggers, we call them, when a birthday comes along. And as you well know, talking about the past, if I get a trigger, then I have a snowball reasons to cry and grieve. And my brother and I are the only living members of our family now. You know, I was sitting on a picnic table at the farm the other day, and I said, the farm looks so good, we should have a family reunion. He goes, we are. But what I love about that, we still maintain a sense of humor. You know, not long ago, I dug up my whole, family that was in one cemetery, part of the family's in another one, dug them all up and took them all out to the farm, and it became the funniest day of my life.
Well, I saw it. Did you have video? Did you have video?
I videoed it because just thinking this is going to be funny because my brother couldn't be there, so I wanted to video it for him. And then I kept commentating. I told my son, because there was 4 bodies on a flatbed truck. That's the way you do it in Tennessee. And I kept telling my son, I will give you $100 if you go through McDonald's and order 4 cheeseburgers just to watch their face. And he goes, Mom, did you take your meds?
And you took him to the farm.
I did.
I sat down with Governor Mike Huckabee, and he shared how a broken finger led him into his career today. When did you know the call on your life?
Well, it was probably when I was 15. I started work at a radio station at the age of 14, which was the result of a broken finger at age 11, playing Little League Baseball. The quick version of the story is I was playing baseball. I was a catcher. We were a horrible team, never won a game. And a kid hit a foul tip, and I did something catchers intuitively know they're not supposed to do. In addition to my mitt, I put my hand out here because I wanted to make sure I caught the ball. I misjudged it. The ball took this index finger and just bent it back toward my elbow. I mean, it just shattered it. And I held it up and I said, "Hey, coach, I think I broke my finger." I could have been an orthopedic surgeon with diagnostic skills like that. And of course, it ended my baseball season. They told me I could go to the press box and help work on the public address system and announce the batters. Okay, free Cokes, free popcorn doing that. Hope was such a small town that the local radio station broadcast all the Little League games. Now think about how boring that must have been, but they did it. The manager of the station came, and he didn't want to do it because the guy that normally did it got sick. He said, "Kid, would you like to call a few innings?" I said, "Sure." They passed me the mic. Innings later, he said, "You're not bad. When you're 14 and can get your license, come see me, I'll give you a job." And that was the beginning of that.
Beginning of the...
Yep.
I sat down with Jimmy Fortune, and he shared his journey through his bypass surgery.
Well, I had a couple friends that had heart attacks and strokes. They were actually younger than me. And so all these alarms were going off inside of me. And my wife said one day, told her about some little issues I was having. She said, "We're going to make you a doctor's appointment." And I'm like, "Okay, you can if you want to. I don't think there's anything wrong." So I go into this doctor's appointment, and I start telling him what's going on. I passed every test but one. He said, "We're going to do a heart catheterization on you." He said, "I think you might need a stent or something like that." And I said, "Okay." So we lined it up. So I go in and do the catheterization, and he puts this screen up in front of me after it's all over, which shows me my heart, which have 5 blockages, and one was 99%, the others were 95% blocked.
5.
And he said, "I don't know how you're walking around. You hadn't had a massive heart attack yet." He said, "We're going to do emergency surgery. We're going to take you right to the hospital down to Centennial and do surgery, major surgery." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I never had major surgery in my life." And it was a whirlwind. And so we went in and had the surgery done, and everything was fine. Oh my gosh.
Were you scared? Or?
At first I was scared, and then I got to the hospital, and Nina came in, and she said, well, she just had put the announcement out that I had on Facebook that was what I was going to have to go through. She told me, she said, "Jimmy, you wouldn't believe how many people are praying for you right now all around the world." And when she said that, I just felt like I was floating on a cloud. I had no worries, nothing like that at all. So I had to have the surgery. I had this, went into the prep room, and of course I had some of my family with me. When they left, there were some of the doctor, or not nurses there, that were getting me ready for the surgery. Gave me the shot, which only takes a few minutes, a few seconds. Basically you go out. But as soon as she gave me the shot, they walked out of the room, and I heard this voice say, "I've got you." And I looked around like, where did that come from? And I knew that it was God saying, "I've got you. Don't worry," and I didn't. I don't know, I was so thankful that God spared me a heart attack, that I didn't have that to go through. And I remember a few hours later, they got me up to walk after the surgery, and I walked, and I was just eager to get back, get going. And when I got home for the first time, I sat on my back porch, and of course it was during a cold time of the year. But I sat on my back porch, and when I sat there, the sun was shining right down on me, and the beautiful white puffy clouds and a blue sky. And I just broke down and started just thanking God, just thankful. And I've been that way ever since, trying to come up with words to say thank you, and I can't come up with the words, but I know He knows. I'm very thankful that He brought me through it, and I felt like He still has things for me to do.
I sat down with T. Graham Brown, and he shared his story about changing wine back into water.
I'm partying the whole time, and I started drinking when I was in high school and just never let up. I went to the University of Georgia, but I majored in partying, I think. And so it was a given that I was a drinker and pot smoker and hellraiser. That was part of the deal that you got with me. And then I had friends that we were on the same wavelength. Keith Whitley was one of my best friends, and we toured together, and he died of alcohol poisoning. And he was at home. We had just gotten in off the road, and then like 2 days later, he choked on his own vomit. I mean, it was pitiful. You would think that it would have knocked some sense into my head, but it didn't. His manager called me up and said, "Man, we found Keith dead this morning." And I thought, man, this is crazy. And he started crying, said, "Can I send these reporters and news people to your house? I can't face them." So all these news people showed up at my house, and I had to be the face of the Keith Whitley tragedy. But I didn't slow down. Keith and I used to go to this psychologist. They made us go to this psychologist on Music Row and sit in this group therapy thing where everybody whined about their problems and everybody was trying to get sober. And Keith and I were looking at our watch saying, "Boy, when's this going to be over? We want to go get a drink." I mean, we were totally not buying into the program. So, and then I would try to, the Capitol Records people said, "Look, if you don't get sobered up, we're going to drop you." So I'd get on the horse and ride a while and fall off, get on the horse and ride a while and fall off. And then we wrote this song later, a few years later, called "Wine into Water." My friend Bruce Birch, who just passed away, great songwriter, wrote a lot of number ones. We wrote some hits for me together, and he was cutting grass, he told me, and this "Wine into Water" idea came to him. And I think he was really thinking about me because we were such close friends, and I was in bad shape. There was another friend named Ted Hewitt, and we all got together and we wrote this song called "Wine into Water," and it's just a prayer to get sober. That's all the song is. But I didn't get sobered up and stay sober. I'd be drunk again, sober up and get drunk again. And then finally, I'm 67 years old, so about 11 or 12 years ago, I didn't write the day down, but I woke up with a hangover. I mean, I got to where I was pouring vodka in my coffee and firing up a joint first thing in the morning. I mean, that's where I was. That's where my head was. I was just about to die. I woke up one morning, it's just a cliche of a story that you've heard before, but it's true. I looked in the mirror. I was just sick and tired of being tired and sick. And I looked in the mirror one day, and I looked like death. And I said, "Man, what are you doing? You're about to blow everything. You're about to lose your family, your job, everything." And you know, I asked God to help me, and I have not had one craving since that moment. I know it sounds corny, but it's the truth, and I'm sure some people will see this, but hey, I'm here to tell you, man, I've been there, and I know what I'm talking about. I end every show with "Wine into Water," and I tell them my story because you never know who's going to get blessed. And I was talking to Larry Gatlin the other day, and I'd done my testimony during a show, and I said, "Man, do you think this is too corny or anything?" He said, "Man, don't you ever stop doing that, because the day that you don't do it, there's probably somebody out there that needs to hear it."
That's right.
And "Wine into Water" continues to help people. I urge people to go on YouTube and watch the "Wine into Water" videos. I've had people tell me it's changed their mind about suicide. I had an old couple write me a letter that their son had dropped dead cutting their grass, and they made a suicide pact and were going to kill themselves, and her "Wine and Water" changed her mind. This woman told me she'd been beaten up by her husband again, went out on a lonely road, was going to shoot herself in the head, turned on the radio, and bam, "Wine and Water" came on, changed her mind. This football player in Tampa told me that he started smoking crack. He lost his 3 daughters, his wife, his job, his house, went through his money, pulled his truck out on New Year's Day out in the field, hooked up a hose to the exhaust pipe, ran it in the cab, going to kill himself, turned on the radio, and bam, "Wine into Water" came on. I got stories like that all day long. I hear from people every week.
Well, I know somebody today is listening to you.
Well, there's a way out. I'm telling you, there's a way out. And Jesus Christ can change your life, and it's real. God is real, and don't ever doubt it.
I sat down with John Barry in his living room and he sang one of my favorite songs, She's Taken a Shine.
Well, she never was one for turning heads. She was just always kind of there. She had a few nice features, more or less. No red ribbons in her hair. But since Jesse's been coming to the diner, folks are saying that she never looked finer. She's got a different air. She's taking a shine to him, becoming the woman that she's never been. And all of the guys are wishing they hadn't been so blind. She's taking a shine to light. Now there's a sparkle in her eye. They all missed a gem, a diamond within. She's taking a shine.
John, thank you so much. I love that song.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I sat down with Bill Anderson. We talked the Grand Ole Opry, favorite legends like Minnie Pearl.
I joined the Opry as a regular member in 1961, so that has been a while. It's still the most special stage in the world. You can play anywhere, and I've played just about everywhere there is to play. And there's something about that Grand Ole Opry stage. Whether it's at the Opry House or occasionally we go back to the old Ryman Auditorium where the Opry was when I became a member. And there's no feeling quite like it. The young kids come to me, they say, don't you get nervous playing the Opry? I say, no, I don't get nervous. I don't get scared. I get a little keyed up because it is the Opry. And I tell them what Minnie Pearl told me one time. She said, if you don't get a few butterflies, then it doesn't mean as much to you as it should.
Do you still
And
get
it
the
means
butterfly?
a lot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it still means as much to me as it ever did.
What's Minnie Pearl like?
An incredibly beautiful lady, Sarah Cannon. Of course, the Sarah Cannon Cancer Center here is named for her. She was such a caring person. She cared, I think, more for other people than she did for herself, which is evidenced by the fact that she put her name on this cancer center. I didn't mention when you asked me about trials and tribulations in my life, I had, after my wife and I did not survive everything in our marriage, I was with a lady for 12 years who developed cancer and was treated at the Minnie Pearl or Sarah Cannon Cancer Center. She eventually passed away. But Minnie put so much of herself into other people. And she'd walk down that hall at the Grand Ole Opry on a Saturday night, and maybe she would be on early and was going to leave, and maybe I would have a late spot, and she'd walk down that hall, and I never will forget the last time I saw her. She was walking down the hall, and she reached out and she touched me on the arm, and she never called me Bill. She called me Bill Anderson. And she put her hand on my arm and she said, I love you, Bill Anderson.
Oh.
And I put my arm around her and I said, I love you, Minnie Pearl, because I did.
So sweet.
I loved her very, very much.
Oh.
I sat down with Cutter and Cash, my youngest guests on today's Nashville, and they sang, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys.
All right, let's do it. A little bit of mamas. Don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. 1, 2, 3. Now cowboys ain't easy to love and they're harder to hold. They'd rather just give you a song and diamonds or gold. Star belt buckles and old faded Levi's, and each night begins a new day. If you don't understand him or he don't die young, he'll probably just ride away. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Don't let them pick guitars and drive the motor trucks. Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. let your babies grow up to be cowboys. 'Cause they'll never stay home and they're always alone, even with someone they love. Like smoky old pool rooms and clear mountain mornings. All those little warm puppies and children and girls of the night. And that don't know him won't like him, and then that do sometimes don't know how to take him. He ain't wrong, he's just different, but his pride won't let him do the things to make you think he's right. Don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Now don't let them pick guitars and drive the old trucks. Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. 'Cause they'll never stay home and they're always alone, even with someone they love. 'Cause they'll never stay home and they're always alone, even with someone they love.
Oh my goodness, you guys are so much fun. That was wonderful.
Well, thank you.
I sat down with Larry Gatlin at his home, and he sang one of his favorite songs for me.
We've never had a hit record with a second verse. The chorus is what we start with, because we are a chorus. She's a broken all the gold, I don't want to cry. They start with that, and that features the Gatlin brothers' harmony. Then you tell, after I had sung all the gold in California's in a bank in the middle of Beverly Hills, somebody else's name. If you're dreaming about California, it don't matter at all where you played before. California's a brand new game. After you sing that little chorus, I could have gone A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and it was a hit already in the first 30 seconds of the song. Broken Lady, I don't want to cry. It's something I do in the show sometimes. I go, I made a lot of money in the key of G. The key of G's been good to me and my family. The old-time pickers in Nashville, they say that G is the people's key. I've made a lot of money and lost a lot of Grammys, and I made all that money thanks to Big G and the key of G. So we put the vocal part up front, and really the ones that weren't big hits were the ones we started with a verse or something. People want to hear Gatlin boys.
I sat down with Nancy Jones at her home, and she shared how she saved her husband, George Jones. Nancy, you endured a lot of emotional and physical abuse, mostly when George was drinking and under the influence of drugs. Where was your faith in all of this?
With Jesus. I would have never made it without Jesus, I can tell you that. He kept me going. And I knew that I had to keep going in order to get this man to heaven, because when he wasn't drinking and doing all this stuff, you couldn't have asked for anybody any sweeter and nicer. It was the perfect husband. But once he got that 2 drinks in him, he changed. I mean, you would have thought, how can anybody change from 2 drinks and then just get bad and worse and bad? And then it just got so bad. So yes, without Jesus and me praying as hard as I prayed during all that time, I would have never made it.
Years, decades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you ever notice, like, when he took those 2 drinks, I'm out of here, or?
I couldn't leave.
No, I mean not leave, but just like distance yourself from him.
No, I had to get ready to be able to. With George, you could calm him down talking about his mother. You can calm him down talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
So I knew that Jesus was in there. I just had to bring him out. So yes, and then he was just a totally different person. And there were so many demons in there. And in the book, it's got about how everybody in Nashville knows it, how he would go around and talk like an old man, talk like Donald Duck. And he was good at it too. And so I had to get rid of those two people.
You have conversations between the two. He's doing all the talking, but one sounded like Donald Duck. Who was the old movie star? I can't remember his name.
Walter Brennan.
Walter Brennan. He would sound like Walter Brennan. And then the third party was George Jones. And they're all fighting with each other. And Nancy's in the middle of all that, trying to make sense of it all and keep George alive, driving down the road.
Down the road. And he had an accident.
No, I have to tell you about how I got rid of them.
Oh, okay, first,
So we were driving to Alabama, and he kept on talking and arguing with those people. So I finally said, just stop the car. He said, what? I said, I'm going to get rid of them. He said, how are you going to do it? I said, I'll show you. So I opened the door. I pulled out the old man. I pulled out the duck. Guess what? The duck went back in.
The duck went back
oh, wait a minute. I had to get the duck. I had to get the duck. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how far gone he was. And I did get rid of him.
Yes,
and so I slammed the door and said, let's go. And he said, oh, thank you so much for getting rid of them. They were killing me.
And he never talked about it again?
Never, ever.
But he did continue drinking, and that's the accident you were referring to, where everybody thought George had quit drinking. Well, Nancy knew that he hadn't. And
he thought if he had little vodka bottles, those little bitty ones, that you couldn't smell it. Well, I knew he was drinking. I could smell vodka. So he would hide them in his boot, in his suit, anywhere he could hide them. So here I'd be in the closet, digging them out, knowing I'm going to get in trouble if he finds it out. So he'd go to his little hide place, and he's like, you been in my closet? No. Well, I got rid of all of them. But then there was a guy that lived out there that we were letting live free. He would have them stashed at his place on our property. So George would go up there and get them. So it was, you'd had, how I tried to get him off of stuff, people were still giving him stuff.
That's probably what happened.
You kicked him out, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I kicked that guy out.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And you know what? So did George. When we left the hospital, he said, I want that guy gone.
Tell him about the accident, though, because that's what put him in the hospital.
He had the song Choices, so he was calling my daughter because he wanted her to hear the song Choices. And in Alexa's, if you got a CD in there and you're calling somebody, it cuts it off. So he was mad because it kept cutting off. So he was beating the dash and screaming and hollering, and the next thing you know, there was nothing you could hear because he was in the hit the bridge.
He smashed into the side of the bridge. The whole front end of his Lexus SUV was caved in over his body.
And he slid under.
And Nancy heard the sirens from their home.
Did you know? Did something inside of you say?
I knew it was, when I heard him on the front porch, I knew that he had hit something. So I took off running from my house all the way to where that bridge was. And I could never do that again.
It was over a mile away.
I ran. Yeah. And when I got there, they had already pumped him up to let his liver float and his lungs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's all so swollen. And they were like, no, we did that. We have to, because we don't want his liver and his lungs to explode for whatever they were doing. But he didn't believe in seatbelts.
Yeah.
So he went under the dash. So they had to use the life jaws to get him out.
Your faith really grew during this time too, didn't it?
Yeah.
It really did, yeah. And George's did too. And the last few days of his life, he was not in good shape. And he was in the hospital, and he was in almost a comatose condition. And Nancy, you were there with him, and the doctor came in. And you want to tell Terry?
The doctor came in and he said, I'm going to go take a shower. But I said, don't leave me. He said, I'll be right back. I'm going to go take a shower and come back. Well, when he came back, I'm at the foot of the bed rubbing his feet and everything, and he's not talking at all. Hadn't talked for a while. And all of a sudden, that deep voice that everybody would know it was George Jones, he said, "Well, hello there." He said, "I've been looking for you. My name's George Jones." And the doctor said, "He's talking to God." And then he was gone. So that would have been George's mannerism. He would have definitely introduced himself to God like God didn't know who he was.
Oh, that's just precious. And God used you to get him there.
Yep.
Yes,
he did. He started me very young. If you read the book, I was abused when I was young, and I used to never understand why. I mean, you know, it's your mom. Why? But then, now I look back and know why. He was getting me strong then.
I sat down with T.G. Sheppard and Kelly Lang. We talked about breast cancer, losing it all, and what God did for their life.
With my breast cancer diagnosis, I just never questioned that God was there. I never wavered. It was just always, it showed up even brighter in me because that was the only source of comfort that I had. And I think it was a good
well, it was for me.
Both of us, actually.
Really and truly, I tell people all the time that God lives in our house because we are huge prayers. I mean, we pray every day of our life, every night of our life. I just don't know how some people get through life without God. I really don't.
I don't either.
And if I run into somebody who's not a believer, I really try hard to make them understand that their life can be altered forever if they will just believe.
And you're a testimony to it with your struggles. And I know he was there when you were going through your breast cancer. I remember you sharing with me that he was there the entire time.
I'm in the process of writing a book, and it's called I'm Not Going Anywhere, and it's the title of a song that I wrote many years ago. It's playing in a hospital commercial now, all these years later.
I've heard it. It's a beautiful song.
Thank you. And the biggest part of the story is our love story and how he did say my same words back to me, "I'm not going anywhere." And just to know that he could have left. Most men go, "Whoa, this is my way out. This is my way to leave." And I really love that how committed he was to me during that time. And you know, it's not the full reason I'm with him, but it's a huge reason. He was so dedicated and so loving to me, even in a dating relationship that we were in. But I think it bonded us together even stronger than if we had never experienced something like that.
Well, you know, there's a lot of people watching this now that may have cancer in their life when they're in their partner. And when your partner in life has cancer, you also have cancer. You don't feel the pain physically that they feel, but you feel the hurt and you see the pain in the person that you love when they're going through a cancer battle. So it really made us stronger. It really made us realize that we really needed each other in life and we needed God in our life to get through it.
I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm glad we did.
It was, well, you often say that cancer to you was a blessing.
Oh, absolutely. After that, I mean, I was 36 when I was diagnosed, and after that, I just was, I like to say it can be a death sentence maybe to some people, but to me, I chose to be my life sentence. I really changed my life around. I really grew to appreciate things and live more boldly than I did before, and I took much more chances afterwards.
I sat down with Gary Chapman, and he opened up about how God delivered him from a double life.
I was the perfect kid, tried to be, at least. My brother was the wild one, and I saw how that injured my parents, how it hurt them, and I decided not to do that. So I hid all my craziness as best I could. And then as soon as I left home, I didn't hide it anymore. Actually, Bible college, some of the craziest time in my life, honestly. It's mostly preachers' kids, and worse, missionary kids, you know. So I don't know who decided it was a good idea to take all these kids who've lived in the aforementioned varying degrees of repression, and the first time any of them leave home, let's put them in one spot. So we kind of all fed on each other, and it was wild. It was 30 miles from Dallas, crazy town. And I started doing some drugs, some recreational stuff, just smoking weed or whatever. And and just didn't think anything about it. I didn't at all. Then I came to Nashville, and the weed turned to cocaine, which was the songwriter's drug of choice. Honestly, this is not to indict anybody. It's not a justification. It's simply the reality. In the early 80s in Nashville on Music Row, I didn't know many songwriters that weren't doing cocaine. It was the common thing. And again, not an excuse at all. And I went down that path for about 5 years. Again, I had perfected duplicity. I had 2 completely different lives. I had my church life, and I mean it. I really do. I'm writing Christian songs. I'm singing on stage. I believe what I'm doing, and at the same time, I've got this other path that I'm trying to keep one foot on. You think it's hard to live a life? Try 2. It is maddening and exhausting, and I finally got to a place. And this is a story I don't tell in its entirety because there's other people involved. But my first marriage reached a point to where I knew that what I was doing was really harmful. And there was other stuff, but for my part, I decided to quit. And I did that day, September 2nd, 1986. This is wild, I have not seen cocaine since September 2nd, 1986. Living the life that I have clearly lived, I have been completely protected, and I thank God for it. That was difficult, but God was there. He just was there. He gave me the strength I needed, and I walked it out with His help.
I sat down with Jeannie Seely on her porch in Nashville, and we talked about the Grand Ole Opry.
So let's talk more about Nashville. And you came to Nashville and graced the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. What was that like?
Well, actually, that was this past May 28th, a Friday night, was 55 years to the exact day that I made my debut at the Opry. And somebody asked me the other day, how does that feel? I said, every emotion you can imagine or have ever felt goes through your body and mind, I think, at a time like that. It was something that you were almost afraid to dream of ever happening, and now it's happening. And I was watching some of the Olympics and hearing them say, this is the Olympics. Well, the Grand Ole Opry was kind of like the Olympics for me.
Well, I have to ask you, how do you feel every time you walk out on the Grand Ole Opry? Does the feelings change, or do you get used to it, or?
Well, it never gets old, I can tell you that. Maybe I'm not as nervous as I was in the beginning, but I'm always excited. And I think now even more what I can feel is an absolute sense of pride.
Mm-hmm. Well, my husband and I recently saw you at the Grand Ole Opry, and you sang a song that was just beautiful, if you would call it that.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
That song was started by Dottie West, my friend, and my friend Ron Harmon had some of Dottie's memorabilia, and he found this journal where she had started writing this song. And so he took it to Bobby Tomberlin and Steve Wariner. It just hit him so strong. And I truly think that Bobby and Steve finished this song the way Dottie would have. And you talk about a God thing, and the inside cover of that journal, it said Jeannie Seely, 824-7011, which was my old telephone number back years ago. So we took that, it was meant for me to have the song to record, and I'm so grateful.
Thanks for watching. We have many more stories of faith coming. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.